Have you ever wondered what happens when the lines between love and lies blur beyond recognition? What does a man do when he thinks he's finally grabbed the life of luxury he's always craved? He takes his beautiful young mistress to a secluded, multi-million-dollar mountain villa to celebrate his triumph. But he makes one fatal mistake. He doesn't realize the quiet, pregnant wife he left at home, the woman he dismissed as simple and unambitious, is the one who holds the keys to his gilded cage. He thought the villa was his playground for the weekend. He's about to find out it's her empire, and he just trespassed. Stay tuned for a story of betrayal, so deep, and revenge so complete it will leave you breathless. The scent of roasting chicken and rosemary usually filled their modest Chicago brownstone with a sense of warmth, a feeling Clara Beaumont cherished. It was the aroma of stability, of a life built on simple, shared joys. At 7 months pregnant, these small comforts were her anchor in a sea of physical and emotional change. She hummed softly, placing a hand on the gentle swell of her belly, where her son was restlessly kicking as she waited for her husband, Liam Sterling, to come home. Liam entered not with a kiss, but with the sigh of a man carrying the weight of the world, a sound Clara had come to know intimately. He loosened his Brioni tie, the one she'd saved for months to buy him for their 2nd anniversary, and tossed his leather briefcase onto a chair with a thud that seemed to echo his perpetual discontent. "Tough day?" Clara asked, her voice soft. "The usual," he mumbled, running a hand through his perfectly coiffed hair. Henderson closed the Kensington deal, got himself a 7-figure commission and a corner office. He's taking his wife to Monaco to celebrate. Monaco. He said the word as if it tasted like ash in his mouth. Liam was a senior analyst at a prestigious investment firm, Sterling & Fitch, but his ambition far outstripped his position. He was handsome, charming, and possessed a relentless hunger for more. It was a quality Clara had once mistaken for drive, but now in the quiet moments of their life together, it felt more like a corrosive acid eating away at their happiness. He saw their comfortable life not as a blessing, but as a beautifully decorated prison cell. "That's wonderful for him," Clara said, trying to steer the conversation to a happier place. "But we have our own celebration. I made your favorite roast chicken with lemon and herbs." He glanced at the table, his eyes sweeping over the carefully set plates and flickering candles. A flicker of something, was it? Pity contempt crossed his face before he masked it with a tired smile. "Looks great, honey." "Really?" Dinner was a study in contrasts. Clara spoke animatedly about her day volunteering at the City Literacy Foundation, her face glowing as she described helping a young girl finally read a full chapter book. Liam stared past her, his gaze distant, his fork pushing vegetables around his plate. He was physically present, but his mind was elsewhere, likely in a penthouse apartment overlooking Central Park or on the deck of a yacht in the Mediterranean. "I was looking at cribs today," Clara ventured, hoping to draw him in. "There's a beautiful oak one from Restoration Hardware, baby and child, I fell in love with." Liam's focus snapped back to her. "Restoration Hardware, Clara. Do you have any idea how much that costs? We have a baby on the way. We need to be practical. I saw a perfectly good one at Pottery Barn Kids for half the price." "It was just to look, Liam," she said gently, the familiar sting of his financial reprimands making her heart ache. "I just want the best for him." "We all want the best," he countered, his voice taking on a lecturing tone. "But the best has to be earned. It doesn't just fall into your lap. We're not your parents living off a comfortable pension with no real ambition." The jab at her parents, a retired history professor and a librarian, was unfair and deliberate. They were kind, loving people who had instilled in Clara a love for knowledge, and a belief that a person's worth wasn't measured by their bank account. It was a lesson Liam had never managed to learn. To him, her contentment was a character flaw. Later that night, as Clara lay in bed, she felt the chasm between them should growing wider. Liam was on his laptop, the glow of the screen illuminating the tense set of his jaw. He wasn't working. He was scrolling through the website of a bespoke tailor, a watch forum discussing the merits of a Patek Philippe versus an Audemars Piguet, and a real estate site showcasing sprawling mountain estates. He was window shopping for a life he believed he deserved, a life he was convinced she was holding him back from. The lie she was living felt heavier than ever. The secret she carried was a burden she had chosen to bear out of love, a test she had set for the world. Her grandfather, the legendary industrialist Arthur Beaumont, had been a titan of industry, a man who built an empire from nothing. He had also been a man who saw how wealth could corrupt, how it could poison relationships and attract parasites. Before he passed, he had made her promise to live a normal life for a time, to find a partner who would love Clara Beaumont, the book-loving philanthropist, not Clara Beaumont, the sole heiress to a multi-billion-dollar fortune. She had met Liam at a charity gala she'd attended anonymously. He was charming, intelligent, and seemed utterly captivated by her. He loved her stories about her work, her passion for literature, and her dreams of a simple family. Or so she had thought. Now, 2 years into their marriage, and with their first child on the way, she saw the truth. He didn't love her for who she was. He resented her for what she wasn't, a gateway to the elite world he so desperately wanted to join. Her simple life wasn't a charming quirk to him. It was a roadblock. A week later, Liam came home with an uncharacteristic spring in his step. He kissed her a real kiss this time and presented her with a small bouquet of grocery store carnations. "What's this for?" she asked, a cautious hope fluttering in her chest. "I have incredible news," he announced, his eyes shining with an almost manic energy. "The firm is sending me on a leadership retreat this weekend. It's a huge opportunity. Only the top performers were chosen. It's at this exclusive resort up in the mountains, the Eyrie on Silver Lake. Very high-end. It's the kind of place where big deals are made." Clara's blood ran cold. The Eyrie on Silver Lake. It wasn't a resort. It was a 15,000-square-foot glass and cedar masterpiece of architecture, a fortress of solitude and luxury perched on a mountain she owned. It was her grandfather's final project, his personal sanctuary, and now it was hers. It was the most private and valuable of all the Beaumont properties, its existence known only to a handful of people. There was no corporate retreat. There were no top performers. There was only a lie. She felt the baby kick a sharp, insistent reminder of the life growing inside her, the life she had to protect. She looked at her husband, at his handsome, beaming face, a mask of ambition and deceit, and she forced a smile. "That's amazing, Liam," she said, her voice betraying none of the glacial dread icing over her heart. "I'm so proud of you." The moment the front door closed behind Liam on Friday morning, the facade of the supportive wife crumbled, leaving behind a woman of cold, calculating clarity. The hurt was a physical thing, a crushing weight on her chest, but it was overshadowed by a burgeoning, unfamiliar rage. This wasn't just about infidelity. This was a violation of a sacred space, a desecration of her family's legacy for a tawdry affair. Liam had packed his finest suit, a new bottle of expensive cologne, and a pair of Italian leather shoes he'd hidden in the back of his closet. He hadn't packed his laptop or any work binders. He had packed for a weekend of seduction, not a corporate seminar. The lie was as transparent as the floor-to-ceiling windows of her mountain home. Clara moved with a purpose she hadn't felt in years. She bypassed their shared laptop and went to her personal tablet, a device Liam dismissed as her little toy for reading books. With a few taps, she accessed the Beaumont Holdings mainframe, a secure network that managed the vast and intricate empire her grandfather had built. Her identity confirmed through a multi-layered biometric scan granted her access to everything from stock portfolios and international real estate holdings to the security feeds of every property she owned. Her fingers flew across the screen. First, she checked the recent charges on the joint credit card Liam used for his business expenses. He was usually meticulous, but in his excitement, he had grown sloppy. There it was, a $3,000 charge from 2 days prior at La Perla, the luxury lingerie boutique. Another charge for an exorbitant dinner for two at Alinea, a restaurant he'd always claimed was pretentiously overpriced. The timeline was damning. He had been wining, dining, and clothing his mistress in preparation for their weekend getaway. Her next search was more personal. She pulled up the employee roster for Sterling and Fitch. She scrolled through the faces, a grim parade of ambitious young men and women. Then she saw her, Jessica Vance, a junior marketing associate, young, beautiful, in a sharp, predatory way, with a biography that mentioned her love of skiing, sailing, and the finer things in life. A quick encrypted cross-reference of personnel files showed Jessica had also requested Friday and Monday off for personal reasons. The pieces clicked into place with sickening precision. The final step was the hardest. With a deep breath, Clara navigated to the live security network for the Eyrie on Silver Lake. Her grandfather had installed the system himself. It was discreet, state-of-the-art, and accessible only by her and one other person, her longtime family attorney and estate manager, Mr. Abernathy. She tapped the icon, and a dozen camera angles populated the screen. Exterior shots showed the pristine, snow-dusted landscape, the heated infinity pool steaming gently in the crisp mountain air. Then she selected the interior feed for the great room. The image that resolved on her screen sent a tremor through her body. There, standing in the middle of her grandfather's living room, was Liam. He was laughing, a bottle of champagne in his hand, a 1996 Salon Le Mesnil, from her private cellar, a bottle worth more than their car. And next to him, her fingers tracing the spine of a rare first-edition book on the shelf, was Jessica Vance. She was wearing a silk robe that Clara knew for a fact was not hers. They were touching everything their presence a stain on the carefully curated space. Liam was gesturing expansively, as if he were the lord of the manor. Clara watched her breath catching in her throat as he led Jessica to the massive panoramic window. He pointed out at the lake below his posture, radiating a smug proprietary pride. He was performing, playing the role of the powerful man he so desperately wanted to be, using Clara's legacy as his stage and her assets as his props. The betrayal was so profound, so audacious, it almost defied comprehension. He hadn't just cheated on her. He had stolen from her. He was using her heritage, the very thing she had hidden, to protect their love, as the currency to buy the affection of another woman. Tears pricked at her eyes, hot and sharp, but she blinked them away. This was not the time for grief. Grief could come later. This was the time for action. She took a screenshot of the security feed, the image of Liam and Jessica toasting with her priceless champagne, and saved it to a secure file. Evidence. She then placed a call. The phone was answered on the first ring. "Mr. Abernathy," she said, her voice low and steady, devoid of the emotion churning within her. "Clara." His voice was warm, a familiar comfort for as long as she could remember. Is everything all right? Is it the baby? The baby is fine, William. I, however, am not. I have a situation, a security breach at the Eyrie. There was a pause on the other end. Mr. Abernathy, a man of impeccable discretion and razor-sharp intellect, understood the gravity of her tone immediately. The Eyrie was more than just a house. A breach. The silent alarms haven't been triggered. The perimeter is secure. He said, his voice instantly shifting from paternal to professional. The breach is on the inside, Clara explained coolly. My husband, Liam Sterling, has gained unauthorized access to the property. He has a guest with him, a woman named Jessica Vance. Another pause, longer this time. She could almost hear the gears turning in his brilliant legal mind as he processed the implications. Clara, I am so profoundly sorry, he finally said, his voice laced with genuine sorrow for her personal pain. Thank you, William, she replied, her own voice hardening. But I am not calling for sympathy. I'm calling for a solution. I need you to assemble a team. I want our best security personnel and a local sheriff on standby. Have them meet me at the access road gate tomorrow at 2 p.m. sharp. I want a locksmith and a digital forensics expert ready to sweep the premises. And please draft the necessary legal documents. All of them. All of them. He confirmed, knowing exactly what she meant. Divorce filings, a petition to nullify their prenuptial agreement on grounds of fraud and infidelity, legal notices to every financial institution they shared, freezing all joint assets. Every last one, she confirmed. He thinks he's entered the world of the elite. I'm going to show him the exit. Consider it done, Clara. We will be ready. What is your plan? Clara looked at the screen, at the man she once loved, and the woman who was a stranger, both of them laughing in her home, oblivious to the storm that was about to break over their heads. I'm going to pay them a visit, she said, a sliver of ice in her voice. It's time the lady of the house made an appearance. The drive from Chicago to the secluded mountains of Silver Lake was a 5-hour journey through the heart of the country, a transition from bustling urbanity to serene, imposing nature. For Clara, it was a pilgrimage from one life to another. She wasn't driving her sensible hybrid sedan. At her request, Mr. Abernathy had a car delivered from her private collection an hour after her call, a slate-grey Aston Martin DB11, a vehicle of understated power and elegance. Liam didn't even know it existed. Driving it now felt like slipping back into a skin she had shed for love, a skin she now needed for war. The car devoured the highway, miles with a low predatory growl. Inside the silent leather-clad cabin, Clara was an island of calm, in a swirling vortex of memory and resolve. She thought of her grandfather, Arthur, and his gravelly voice echoing his most frequent warning. Money doesn't change who you are, Clara Bell. It just makes you more of it. A good man becomes a philanthropist. A greedy man becomes a monster. Liam, it seemed, was starving, and he had just walked into a banquet. She had loved him so completely. She had believed in the future they were building, a future centered on family love and shared values, not stock options and luxury brands. She had willingly placed herself in a gilded cage of her own making, hiding her immense resources, all to give their love a chance to be real. And for what? So he could use the very keys to that cage to entertain his mistress? The irony was so bitter, it tasted like poison. As the cityscape gave way to rolling farmlands, and then to the foothills of the mountains, her phone buzzed. It was a text from Liam. Hey honey, this retreat is intense, back-to-back sessions. Barely have a minute to breathe. Hope you and the little guy are doing okay. Love you. The casual cruelty of the lie was breathtaking. She imagined him typing it with one hand, a glass of her champagne in the other, Jessica laughing beside him. She typed back a simple, placid reply. "We're fine. Take care. And learn lots. Love you too." The words felt like shards of glass in her mouth. Every "love you" he had ever uttered now seemed like a calculated move in a long con. Was any of it real? Had he ever looked at her, the real her, and felt anything other than the chafing disappointment of a prospector who thought he'd struck gold but only found pyrite? The road began to climb, winding through dense forests of pine and aspen. This was Beaumont land, miles and miles of it, purchased by her grandfather decades ago to preserve its natural beauty. The air grew thinner, crisper. The world fell away, replaced by a majestic silence, broken only by the hum of the Aston Martin's engine. An hour later, she reached the first checkpoint, a discreet unmarked gate on a private access road. As promised, 2 black SUVs were waiting. Mr. Abernathy stepped out of the lead vehicle as she pulled up. He was a tall, impeccably dressed man in his late 60s, his silver hair neatly combed and his expression a perfect blend of professional composure and personal concern. "Clara," he said, opening her car door. "Are you sure about this? I can handle it. You don't need to put yourself through this." "I need to do this myself, William," she said, her voice firm as she stepped out of the car. Her pregnancy was prominent now, and she placed a protective hand on her belly. "I need to see his face. I need him to understand." He nodded, his eyes filled with a sad understanding. "Very well. The sheriff is with my security chief in the second vehicle. They are under instructions to act only on your direct command. We have a communications jammer active. No one on the property can make or receive calls until we deactivate it. We are in complete control." "Excellent. Let's go," she said. The small convoy proceeded up the winding 3-mile-long driveway. The area was designed for ultimate privacy and security. As they rounded the final turn, the house came into view, and even now its beauty took her breath away. It wasn't a gaudy mansion, but a work of art built of natural stone cedar and vast panes of glass that seemed to merge the structure with the mountainside itself. It was a place of peace, of quiet contemplation, a place Liam and his guest had turned into a cheap motel. They parked out of sight of the main windows. Mr. Abernathy handed her a small, elegant keycard. "This will override the lock Liam used," he said softly. "The house is yours again." Clara took the card. Its cool metallic weight felt like a scepter in her hand. The security team, 2 large, stone-faced men in dark suits, flanked Mr. Abernathy, while the sheriff remained by the vehicles, a silent official presence. "Wait here," Clara instructed them, her voice barely a whisper. "Give me 5 minutes alone with them. Then you can come in." Mr. Abernathy hesitated. Clara is that wise. She looked at him, and for the first time, he saw the full, unyielding force of Arthur Beaumont's will in her eyes. "He is the father of my child, William. I will grant him the courtesy of hearing his downfall directly from me. And I want to see her face when she realizes her sugar daddy's credit line has just been permanently closed." With that, she turned and walked toward the massive cedar door of her house, her steps steady and sure. The pregnant, unassuming wife was gone. In her place stood Clara Beaumont, the billionaire owner, arriving to evict the squatters. The sound of obnoxious, bass-heavy pop music pulsed through the thick cedar door, a profane heartbeat in a house built for silence and symphony. Clara's hand did not tremble as she raised the keycard. The electronic lock chirped a soft, melodic tone, the owner's access chime, and the heavy door swung inward with a silent hydraulic hiss. The scene before her was even more vulgar than the security feed had suggested. Liam and Jessica were dancing, if it could be called that, in the center of the great room. Liam, his tie undone and shirt unbuttoned halfway down his chest, was swaying awkwardly, a half-empty bottle of Macallan 25 from her father's private collection dangling from his fingers. Jessica, clad in a ridiculously small bikini and one of Clara's cashmere throws, was laughing a shrill, unpleasant sound that scraped against the room's perfect acoustics. Empty glasses, a plate of half-eaten imported cheeses, and an overturned bowl of olives littered the surface of a priceless George Nakashima coffee table. They hadn't heard her enter. Clara stood there for a long moment, a silent spectre in the doorway, letting the tableau of their cheap desecration burn itself into her memory. This was the fire that would fuel her resolve. She cleared her throat. It was not a loud sound, but in the sudden absence of music, she'd disabled the Sonos system from her phone. The moment she was inside, it cracked through the room like a bullwhip. They froze. Liam turned first, a drunken, lopsided grin on his face, ready to greet what he probably assumed was a housekeeper he hadn't been told about. The grin vaporized when he saw her. His face drained of all color, leaving a pasty, slack-jawed mask of pure shock. He looked from Clara's stony face to her swollen belly, and his eyes widened in horror as if seeing them both for the first time. "Clara," he stammered, his voice a strangled whisper. The whiskey bottle slipped from his grasp and thudded onto the plush Tibetan rug, a dark stain spreading instantly. What are you doing here? How did you get here?" Jessica, meanwhile, was recovering from her initial surprise with belligerent arrogance. She pulled the cashmere throw tighter around her shoulders, glaring at Clara with open hostility. "Who the hell are you?" she demanded, looking to Liam. "Is this your crazy ex-wife or something?" Clara ignored her completely. Her eyes, cold as the mountain lake outside, were locked on Liam. "I should ask you the same question, Liam," she said, her voice dangerously calm. "What are you doing here? I believe you told me you were at a corporate leadership retreat." Liam scrambled for a lie, his mind visibly malfunctioning under the pressure. This is the CEO's private lodge. He lent it to me. To us. To the team for the weekend. A reward. I was going to tell you." The lie was so pathetic, so transparently desperate, that Clara almost laughed. Instead, she took a slow, deliberate step into the room, her gaze sweeping over the mess, the empty bottles, the woman in her bikini. "The CEO's lodge," she repeated, her voice dripping with mock curiosity. "That's fascinating. I wasn't aware that Robert Henderson, the CEO of Sterling and Fitch, had any relationship with my grandfather Arthur Beaumont, especially since my grandfather passed away 5 years ago after personally overseeing every last detail of the construction of this house, his house, and now my house." The words hung in the air, each one a hammer blow against the glass walls of Liam's deception. Jessica's smug expression dissolved into a mask of confusion. She looked from Clara to Liam, her eyes narrowing. "What is she talking about? Liam, your boss's house." Liam was shaking his head, sweat beading on his forehead. "She's lying. She's delirious. The pregnancy." Clara finally turned her gaze to Jessica, a look of profound pity and dismissal in her eyes. "He told you he was rich, didn't he?" she said, her voice soft but carrying an edge of steel. "That this was his life, that he was some big-shot executive on the fast track to a partnership." Jessica stared, speechless. "Let me introduce myself properly," Clara continued, stepping further into the room. "My name is Clara Beaumont. Liam is my husband, and you are currently an uninvited guest in my home, drinking my liquor, and I believe wearing my throw." She gestured to the cashmere wrap. I'd like it back. The full weight of the situation finally crashed down on Jessica. Her mouth opened and closed silently, her face a comical picture of dawning horror. She looked at Liam, who was now staring at Clara with a look of utter despair, the look of a man watching his entire world being consumed by a tidal wave. Beaumont. Jessica whispered the name, finally registering. Beaumont Holdings. Beaumont Tower. The Beaumont Foundation. It was a name synonymous with old money and immense power in Chicago. No. No way. I'm afraid so, Clara said coolly. At that precise moment, as if summoned by a stage director, the front door opened again. Mr. Abernathy stepped inside, followed by his 2 imposing security guards. Their presence filled the room instantly, transforming it from a party into a crime scene. Liam Sterling. Mr. Abernathy said, his voice resonating with legal authority. My name is William Abernathy. I am legal counsel for the Beaumont estate and for Mrs. Clara Beaumont Sterling. You are hereby given notice to vacate these premises immediately. Liam just stared, his mind completely broken. William Abernathy, he mumbled, recognizing the name from the top of the city's most powerful lawyer rankings. And you, Miss Vance. Mr. Abernathy continued, turning his icy gaze on Jessica. You are trespassing. I would advise you to gather your belongings and leave before my client decides to press charges. Jessica, galvanized by fear, scrambled to collect her purse and phone from the couch. She didn't even look at Liam. Her dream of a wealthy benefactor had just exploded in the most humiliating way possible. She scurried past the security guards and out the door without a backward glance, the cashmere throw left in a heap on the floor. Now it was just Clara and Liam, with the silent, watchful presence of her team. The silence stretched thick with ruin. Why? Liam finally choked out, his voice cracking. Why would you hide this from me, all this? He gestured wildly at the room, at the view, at the impossible luxury surrounding them. This was my dream, and you had it all along. You let me struggle. You let me feel like a failure. The sheer, unadulterated narcissism of his question was the final blow to whatever lingering affection Clara might have had. Your dream, she said, her voice rising for the first time, laced with a fury that was cold and absolute. Your dream was to have things. My dream was to have a partner, a husband who loved me, Clara, not a balance sheet. I didn't want a man who was only with me for what I could buy him. I wanted a man who would build a life with me, a real life. I gave you that chance. I gave you all of me. She took a step closer, her eyes blazing. And you, what did you do? The moment you thought you had a taste of this life, you used it to betray me. You brought another woman into our lives, into my home, while I am carrying your son. You accuse me of letting you struggle, you pathetic, greedy little man. You have no idea what a real struggle is. But you're about to find out. She turned to Mr. Abernathy. William, escort Mr. Sterling from the property. He is not to take anything with him but the clothes on his back. His access to our home in the city is to be revoked, and all joint accounts have been frozen effective immediately. He will be served with divorce papers by Monday morning. Liam's face crumpled. The arrogant confidence was gone, replaced by the raw, primal terror of a man who has just lost everything. Clara, no, please. I love you. It was a mistake. A stupid, meaningless mistake. Don't do this. Think about the baby. Oh, I am, Clara said, her voice dropping back to an icy whisper as she placed a hand on her belly. I am thinking of nothing but this baby, and I will not raise him in a house with a man like you. I will not have his father be a liar, a cheat, and a thief. She turned her back on him, a gesture of final and complete dismissal. "Get him out of my house." The security guards moved forward, each taking one of Liam's arms. He didn't resist. He was utterly broken. As they led him past her towards the door, his eyes filled with tears of self-pity pleaded with her. She did not look at him. She kept her gaze fixed on the magnificent view out the window, the serene, beautiful lake that was hers, the future that was hers. The last thing Liam saw of his wife was her regal, unyielding silhouette against the mountain vista he had so desperately coveted. Then the door closed, and he was left with nothing. The crisp mountain air felt like a slap in the face as the security guards deposited Liam Sterling on the gravel of the driveway. The heavy cedar door of the Eyrie clicked shut behind him with an air of finality, the sound of his entire world locking him out. He stood there for a moment, disoriented, the pop music from his tryst still a faint, mocking echo in his mind. The black SUVs started their engines, their headlights cutting through the encroaching twilight, and drove away without a backward glance, leaving him utterly alone in the wilderness. His first instinct was to call someone. He fumbled for his phone, his hands shaking so violently he almost dropped it. He tried to call Clara, to beg, to reason, to scream. The call wouldn't connect. No service. He tried to send a text. Message failed to send. He remembered Mr. Abernathy's words about a communications jammer. They had thought of everything. They had isolated him in his own personal hell. Panic, cold and sharp, began to set in. The temperature was dropping rapidly as the sun dipped behind the mountain peaks. He was wearing a thin dress shirt and trousers completely inadequate for the cold. He had no wallet, no keys. His belongings, his phone charger, his expensive weekend bag, his very identity were inside that house, or perhaps in his car, a sleek Audi A7, parked somewhere down the long private road. He started walking, stumbling down the gravel path in his slick-soled dress shoes. Every shadow in the dense forest seemed to hold a threat. The silence of the mountains, which had seemed so aspirational just hours before, was now oppressive and menacing. It took him nearly an hour of frantic, near-running descent to reach the main access gate where he'd left his car. He slumped against the driver's side door, gasping for breath relief washing over him. He could drive back to the city, find a friend, figure this out. He pulled on the handle. Locked. He felt his pockets. The key fob wasn't there. It was in his jacket back in the house. A fresh wave of despair crashed over him. He was stranded. After another 30 minutes of desperate, useless searching, a car approached. It wasn't one of the black SUVs. It was a local taxi, its roof light a beacon in the darkness. It pulled up beside him. "You Mr. Sterling?" The driver asked, a grizzled man with a sympathetic look. Yes, that's me," Liam said, hope surging. "Did my wife send you? A Mr. Abernathy called. Said you needed a ride to the bus station in town," the driver said. He gestured to a small envelope on the passenger seat. "He prepaid the fare and left this for you." The bus station. Not a ride back to the city. The bus station. The humiliation was a physical blow. Liam snatched the envelope. Inside was $500 in cash and a single starkly printed note, a severance. "Do not attempt to contact my client again. All future correspondence will be through legal counsel." The 2-hour bus ride back to Chicago was a blur of fluorescent lights, the smell of disinfectant, and the hollow-eyed stares of his fellow passengers. He was one of them now. He, Liam Sterling, who dined at Michelin-starred restaurants and dreamed of Patek Philippe watches, was riding the midnight bus like a common vagrant. He arrived in the city in the early hours of the morning and took a taxi to the brownstone, his last $100 crumbling in his fist. He would wake Clara, he would get on his knees, he would promise her anything. He walked up the familiar steps and put his key in the lock. It didn't turn. He tried again. Nothing. He looked closely and saw the telltale scratches of a brand new deadbolt. The locks had already been changed. He banged on the door, his voice hoarse. "Clara, Clara, it's me. Let me in. Please, let's just talk." No response. The house remained dark and silent. A light flicked on in the neighboring house, a curtain pulled back by a curious, annoyed face. Defeated, he slumped onto the steps, the full catastrophic reality of his situation settling in. The next 48 hours were a systematic dismantling of his life. When he went to an ATM on Monday morning, his debit card was declined. "Account frozen," the screen read. He tried his credit cards. All declined. He called his office planning to beg for an advance, only to be patched through to human resources. Liam, the HR director's voice, was cold and formal. "We received a call this morning from William Abernathy. In light of the serious allegations of misuse of company time and misrepresentation, coupled with a potential scandal involving the Beaumont family, the board has decided to terminate your employment, effective immediately." "You can't do that," he sputtered. "I'm a top performer. Your performance is no longer a factor. Security is on their way to escort you to your desk to collect your personal items. You have 10 minutes. He was marched through the office like a criminal, his former colleagues staring, whispering. David Chen, his closest friend at the firm, just shook his head with a look of pity and disgust. The life he had worked so hard to build, the persona he had so carefully crafted, had been erased in a weekend. That afternoon, a courier delivered a thick legal envelope to the cheap motel room he'd paid for with the last of Abernathy's cash. It contained the divorce papers. He read through them in a daze. The terms were brutal and swift. Clara was citing infidelity and fraud. The prenuptial agreement, which he had thought was his safety net, had a stringent infidelity clause that rendered it null and void. He was entitled to nothing. Not the house, not the car, not a single dollar from any account bearing the Beaumont name. The papers also included a restraining order forbidding him from coming within 500 feet of Clara, her residence, or her place of work. A separate page detailed his potential criminal liability for trespassing and grand larceny for the items he had consumed and used at the Eyrie, including the vintage whiskey and champagne valued at over $20,000. The document made it clear that Clara would consider pressing charges if he contested the divorce in any way. It was checkmate. He tried to call Jessica, a desperate last-ditch attempt for some sort of alliance or comfort. Her number was disconnected. She had vanished, a ghost who had wisely fled the scene of the crime. He was completely, irrevocably alone, a king dethroned from a castle that had never been his left, with nothing but the crushing weight of his own greed. While Liam's world was imploding, Clara was methodically rebuilding hers. She remained at the Eyrie for a week, not as a refugee hiding from her pain, but as a sovereign reclaiming her territory. The mountain air, clean and sharp, seemed to clear the fog of betrayal from her mind. The house, once tainted by Liam's presence, was cleansed. She had professionals come in to change the sheets, shampoo the rugs, and replace every bottle of alcohol he had touched. She reclaimed the space piece by piece. She spent her days in quiet reflection. She walked the wooded trails her grandfather had carved, swam in the heated pool under a vast, starry sky, and sat for hours in the library, surrounded by the books that had been her truest friends. The grief was there, a deep, resonant ache for the man she thought she had married, and the future she thought they would share. She allowed herself to feel it, to cry for the loss of her innocence, and the love she had so freely given. But her tears were not for Liam, as he was, but for the illusion he had shattered. Mr. Abernathy flew in to join her midweek, bringing with him a mountain of paperwork. They sat in the great room, the George Nakashima table, now pristine, and planned the future. "The divorce is straightforward," he explained, his tone gentle but businesslike. "He has no grounds to contest it without incriminating himself further. His legal counsel, a public defender, I imagine will advise him to sign everything and walk away." "Good," Clara said, her voice steady. "I want a clean break, for my son's sake." "About that," Mr. Abernathy continued, sliding another file across the table, "I've taken the liberty of drafting the paperwork to have your son's last name legally declared as Beaumont. You can of course add Sterling as a middle name, if you wish, but—" "No," Clara interrupted her decision, instant and absolute. "He will be a Beaumont. He will be raised with the values of that name: integrity, philanthropy, strength. He will have no association with the name of a man who betrayed his mother." Her resolve impressed even Abernathy, who had known her since she was a child. He saw the fire of her grandfather in her, a strength she had kept hidden, but was now embracing. "And what about the foundation?" he asked. "The board has been asking when you might consider taking a more active role. Your grandfather always intended for you to take his seat as chairperson." Clara had been content to work quietly in the background, managing a small literacy program, leaving the high-level corporate maneuvering to the board her grandfather had appointed. It was part of her normal life. But that life was over. Hiding her power had not protected her. It had only made her a target for a predator. "Schedule a full board meeting for next month," she said, a new authority in her voice. "It's time I took my seat at the head of the table. I have some ideas for a new initiative I want to launch, a program providing housing and educational grants for single mothers. I think I've just found my inspiration." The days at the Eyrie were not just about legal strategy, they were about healing. She spoke to her parents, telling them a sanitized but truthful version of events. They were heartbroken for her, but their unconditional love and support were a balm on her wounded spirit. They promised to come and stay with her as soon as she returned to the city. On her last day at the mountain house, Clara stood on the balcony overlooking the lake. The sun was rising, painting the sky in hues of pink and gold. She placed both hands on her belly, feeling the strong, steady movements of her son within. He was her future. He was her legacy. Liam had been a chapter in her life, a painful lesson in judgment. But he would not be her story. Her story was just beginning. She was not just the heartbroken wife anymore. She was Clara Beaumont, the chairperson of the Beaumont Foundation, a mother-to-be and the master of her own vast fortune and destiny. She had retreated to the mountains as a victim of deceit, but she would descend as a queen, returning to her throne. 6 months later, the city of Chicago buzzed with news of the Beaumont Foundation's latest and most ambitious project, the Phoenix Initiative. The program, personally spearheaded by the Foundation's new and surprisingly dynamic chairperson, Clara Beaumont, was dedicated to empowering single mothers by providing them with secure housing, childcare, and scholarships for higher education and vocational training. Clara, now in the final weeks of her pregnancy, was a force of nature. She was on the cover of Forbes magazine, not as an heiress, but as a visionary philanthropist changing lives. The media portrayed her as a symbol of grace and strength, a woman using her immense resources to lift others up. No one knew the deeply personal furnace in which that strength had been forged. She had moved out of the brownstone, leaving its painful memories behind. Her new home was a magnificent penthouse apartment atop Beaumont Tower, a place of light and sweeping city views. Mr. Abernathy had managed the sale of the old house, and every trace of Liam Sterling had been scrubbed from her life. The divorce had been finalized quietly and swiftly. Liam had signed the papers without a fight, disappearing into obscurity. One crisp autumn afternoon, Liam Sterling stood on a bustling street corner, a flimsy reflective vest over his tattered coat. His job was directing traffic around a construction site, a soul-crushing minimum-wage existence. His once handsome face was gaunt, his eyes hollowed out by months of sleeping in shelters and cheap motels. His designer suits were long gone sold for food. His charm had curdled into a bitter resentment that radiated from him like a foul odor. He looked up and his heart stopped. On the massive digital billboard across the street, a news report was playing. It was her, Clara. She was standing at a podium, radiant and powerful, announcing a record-breaking fundraising haul for the Phoenix Initiative. She looked more beautiful than he had ever seen her, her pregnancy only adding to her aura of serene confidence. The camera zoomed in on her face as she smiled, a genuine luminous smile he realized he hadn't seen in years. A co-worker nudged him. "Hey Sterling, stop gawking and spin the sign you're holding up traffic." Liam turned away from the billboard. The image of his ex-wife's triumph burned into his retinas. He was invisible to her, a ghost from a past she had decisively conquered. He had craved a view from the top, and in a way he had gotten it. He was at the very bottom, looking up at the woman he had thrown away, watching her soar in a stratosphere he could never hope to reach. Miles above him, in her penthouse apartment, Clara stood in a newly finished nursery. The room was painted in soft shades of cream and blue, with a mural of a gentle mountain landscape on one wall, a subtle homage to the eyrie where her new life had begun. The beautiful oak crib from Restoration Hardware she had once dreamed of was assembled in the corner, waiting. She looked out the vast window at the city sprawling below her, a kingdom of glass and steel. She felt a gentle kick from within, and smiled, placing a hand on her belly. She was no longer afraid of her wealth or her power. She had learned that they were not a liability to be hidden, but a tool to be wielded, a legacy to be honored. She had wanted a man to build a life with, but she had discovered she was more than capable of building an empire on her own. Her son would be born into love, strength, and integrity. He would be born a Beaumont. And as the city lights began to twinkle to life, Clara knew with absolute certainty that this was not an ending. This was the dawn. That was the story of Clara Beaumont, a woman who had her world turned upside down by the ultimate betrayal, only to find the unshakable strength that was inside her all along. It's a powerful reminder that sometimes the most devastating moments in our lives are the ones that force us to become the person we were always meant to be. Liam Sterling's greed led him to a gilded cage, but he failed to realize that Clara held the only key. What would you have done in Clara's position? Would you have sought revenge, or would you have focused on building a new, better future? We'd love to hear your thoughts in the comments below. If this story of deception, empowerment, and ultimate justice resonated with you, please give this video a like and share it with someone who loves a story of a true queen taking back her throne. And don't forget to subscribe to our channel and hit the notification bell so you won't miss our next real-life drama.